Hello, and welcome. Take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let yourself settle in. Tonight, we're going to explore something we've all experienced or witnessed: the endings, the breakups, the moments when relationships took unexpected turns. But don't worry, these aren't tales of heartbreak meant to sadden you. Instead, they're stories that remind us we're all beautifully, messily human, stories that make us smile, shake our heads, and realize that every ending, no matter how strange, teaches us something valuable. So close your eyes if you'd like, relax your shoulders, and let's journey through the fascinating world of modern dating and the creative ways people have said goodbye. The world of online dating has given us countless stories. Some beautiful, some baffling, and some that make us wonder what people were possibly thinking. These are real experiences from real people, shared in the quiet corners of the internet where honesty flows freely. Let's begin with the lighter side, the breakups that, while perhaps painful at the time, now serve as amusing reminders that love and compatibility are wonderfully unpredictable. Picture this: a couple, together for some time, living their daily lives. Everything seems normal, ordinary, comfortable. Until one day, the truth comes out. The real reason for the breakup. It wasn't infidelity. It wasn't money problems. It wasn't any of the usual suspects. It was how he squeezed the toothpaste tube. Yes, you heard that correctly. His ex-girlfriend ended their relationship because of his toothpaste squeezing technique. Now he's married to someone else, someone who finds his toothpaste habits perfectly acceptable. And when he told his new wife this story, she simply laughed. Sometimes, one person's deal breaker is another person's endearing quirk. What seems catastrophic to one becomes charmingly insignificant to another. Then there's the story of the man who thought he'd found something real. They'd been dating for about 2.5 years. Things were going well, or so it seemed. One day, completely out of the blue, his girlfriend asked him a question. "When are you going to stop coloring your hair?" He'd been dyeing his hair various unnatural colors since he was 15. He was 26 at the time. She used to tell him it was her favorite thing about him. But now, suddenly, it was embarrassing. She told him he needed to grow up, that it was embarrassing to be around in public. Here's the beautiful part of this story. He's now 41, and he still colors his hair. Because it wasn't a phase. It was him. And her inability to accept that revealed everything he needed to know. Sometimes a breakup isn't about losing someone. It's about discovering who you really are and refusing to dim your colors for anyone. Let me tell you about the Zodiac breakup. This happened in the early 2000s. A man had been in a relationship for 2 years when his girlfriend made an announcement. They weren't compatible. Why? Because her astrology specialist friend told her so. Their zodiac signs, apparently, were cosmically doomed. Now, the beauty of second chances is that sometimes we give them. Her parents and friends told her she was being ridiculous. She came back, apologetic. He decided everyone makes mistakes. They tried again. A couple of months passed. Things seemed better. Until one day, she declined to go out together. The reason? A fortune teller/palm reader told her it wasn't a good day to go out with her man. That was it. He ended it immediately. As he put it, that was one less thing to worry about in his life. Sometimes the universe doesn't determine compatibility. Common sense does. Here's one that perfectly captures the unpredictable nature of modern dating. A man met a woman on a dating app. They arranged to meet for dinner. Everything seemed normal at first, until she arrived with her emotional support iguana. Yes, an actual iguana. To dinner. Now, there's nothing wrong with emotional support animals. They serve important purposes for many people. But perhaps a first dinner date isn't the ideal venue for reptilian companionship. The logistics alone must have been fascinating. Where does one seat an emotional support iguana at a restaurant? Does it get its own chair? These are questions nobody should have to ponder on a first date. Sometimes breakups happen in the most public, most honest ways imaginable. Picture a coffee shop. People working on laptops, reading books, sipping their drinks. A couple sits together. The girl says, calmly, clearly, "I just feel like I'm dating a guy who peaked at 17. The silence that followed must have been deafening. The guy stared at his muffin for a solid 10 seconds. Then he responded. "That's fair." He nodded, stood up, and left. No argument. No defense. No drama. Just acceptance. Sometimes the truth lands so accurately that there's nothing left to say. That muffin witnessed more emotional maturity in 10 seconds than some people display in entire relationships. Then there was the couple whose relationship ended over light bulbs. Specifically, fluorescent light bulbs. The wife was sensitive to them. They bothered her, caused her discomfort. The husband, however, was deeply committed to saving the environment. He insisted on using fluorescent bulbs throughout their home. Neither would compromise. And so, in a battle between environmental consciousness and physical comfort, the relationship dimmed and went dark. One wonders if they'd stayed together long enough for LED bulbs to become popular, whether their marriage might have been saved by technology. Let's talk about the fries. Yes, fries. A man divorced his wife. Not because of cheating. Not because of financial problems. Not because of fundamental incompatibilities. Because she ate his fries. After he explicitly told her not to. Now, before we judge too harshly, consider this. Perhaps those fries were the final straw. Perhaps they represented years of boundaries being crossed, requests being ignored, needs being dismissed. Or perhaps they were just really, really good fries. Either way, somewhere out there is a woman who learned an expensive lesson about respecting her partner's French fries. Here's a story about veganism and intention. Two friends were both vegan. They started dating. Everything aligned perfectly, or so it seemed. Until one day, one of them broke up with the other. The reason? He was vegan for the wrong reasons. You see, one was vegan for animal welfare. The other, for environmental reasons. Apparently, the motivation behind the dietary choice mattered more than the choice itself. This raises fascinating questions about compatibility. If two people arrive at the same destination via different paths, does the journey matter? To some, apparently, it matters greatly. To others, this might seem like an elaborate way to end a relationship that wasn't working for entirely different reasons. Sometimes breakups come with production value. Imagine receiving a video from your girlfriend of 1 year. You open it, curious, unsuspecting. She's singing. Wait, she wrote a song. A breakup song. Complete with choreography. And backup dancer. And that backup dancer is one of your good friends. The man who received this musical farewell was at a party when it arrived. In a moment of spectacularly poor judgment, he played it aloud. His friends heard it all. They witnessed, in real time, his heart breaking to a melody. You have to admire the creativity, even while wincing at the cruelty. Somewhere between the opening verse and the final chorus, their relationship became a performance piece. Whether he wanted to be part of that show or not. Picture a first date. You're nervous, excited, hopeful. You arrive at the meeting spot. And there's your date, looking lovely, standing next to her mother. Not my mom happened to be nearby. Not we ran into my mom. No. Mom was invited. Mom was part of the date. This wasn't disclosed beforehand. This wasn't discussed or agreed upon. One moment you're preparing for a romantic evening, the next you're in a surprise intergenerational gathering. The date ended exactly as you'd expect. Though one wonders what the mother thought of the whole arrangement. Did she enjoy her role as the world's most present chaperone? These are mysteries we'll never solve. And then there's the resume date. Someone matched with another person on a dating app. They agreed to meet up. One person arrived expecting romance, or at least the possibility of connection. The other person arrived with a resume. And a tablet. With a presentation. About their career. They wanted job search advice. Tips on improving their resume. This wasn't a date. This was a surprise career counseling session. As one person wisely noted afterward, I don't think it was really a date. No. No, it was not. It was perhaps the most efficient networking event in history, just wildly misplaced on a dating app. Let me share the story of the dishes. A man would come home from work early. He'd clean up after himself, as one does. His girlfriend, however, would leave her dishes in the sink. And she had a demand. He should clean her dishes. Not their dishes. Her dishes. Despite the fact that she was home and he was at work. This demand became constant. Relentless. Until one day, he'd had enough. He came home from work, packed all his belongings, and left. Just like that. Sometimes the breaking point isn't dramatic. It's not a huge fight or a terrible betrayal. It's the steady drip of disrespect, the constant erosion of boundaries, until one day you realize you'd rather be alone than be someone's unpaid housekeeping service. Here's a paradoxical breakup. A woman broke up with her boyfriend. The reason she gave: you're too good of a guy and you treat me too well. She elaborated. She was jealous of his exes. Because he probably did all the same wonderful things for them that he did for her. Read that again. She was upset that he was consistent in his kindness. That his good treatment of her wasn't unique, but rather, who he was as a person. This story reveals something profound about how we sometimes sabotage our own happiness. How we can be so afraid of not being special that we reject actual goodness. One hopes she eventually realized that a man who treats all his partners well is exactly the kind of man worth keeping. Sometimes breakups happen in the strangest timing. 2 in the morning. You're asleep, peaceful, dreaming. Your partner rolls over. I'm not happy anymore. Just like that. In the vulnerable hours of the night, when defenses are down and thoughts are raw. And then he gets up, gets dressed, takes you home. It's 3 in the morning before you arrive back at your place. You're in shock. You were staying at his place because you had work in the morning and he lived within walking distance. Now you're home at 3, expected at work by 5. You walk 3 hours to work. Try to have a regular work day. And have a breakdown at lunch. Some breakups don't just end the relationship. They upend your entire sense of reality, of timing, of decency. Let's talk about the phone call breakup. But with a twist. A girl had her stepsister call. Not to break up with her boyfriend directly, but to call the boyfriend's parents' phone. His dad answered. The stepsister told the dad that it was over. She broke up with him via his father, who answered the family landline. The layers of removal here are astounding. The girlfriend couldn't even make the call herself. She delegated. And the message didn't even reach its intended recipient initially. His father had to be the intermediary. Son, I have some news. Your girlfriend's stepsister called. Apparently, you're single now. What a conversation that must have been. These stories, funny as they are, remind us of something important. That relationships end in as many ways as they begin. Some with drama, some with quiet resignation, some with such absurdity that years later we can't help but laugh. Each ending, no matter how strange, was someone's reality. Someone's turning point. Someone's moment of realizing that love, compatibility, and timing are far more complex than we ever imagined. Take a deep breath. Let these stories settle. Remember that your own story, whatever it may be, is valid. Whether it ended over toothpaste or timing, over distance or dishes, over zodiac signs or simply growing apart. You're not alone in the beautiful messiness of trying to connect with another human being. And now, let's move into the wild world of modern dating apps, where swipes lead to stories, matches lead to mayhem, and sometimes the way things end is even stranger than how they began. The world changed when dating moved online. Suddenly, you could meet someone from anywhere. A swipe, a message, a match. The possibilities seemed endless. And with those possibilities came a whole new category of relationship endings. Some gentle, some bizarre, some that make you question whether the internet was actually ready for the responsibility of helping people find love. Let's start with a classic. The catfish. A man matched with someone on a dating app. She said she was 25. He was 19. She asked if he minded dating older women. He didn't mind at all. They arranged to meet. When she showed up, his first thought was genuine. Wow, she takes really good pictures. He decided to make the best of it. They went to a bowling alley. And that's when things got truly uncomfortable. Her son worked at the bowling alley. Her son, who was older than him. She wasn't 25. She was 49. Using photos from 20 years ago. But wait. There's more to this story. The discomfort he felt when they arrived at the bowling alley. That wasn't nervousness. That was her. Realizing her son was about to see her on a date with someone younger than him. Imagine that conversation later. Mom, why was that teenager holding your hand? Some deceptions are small, white lies. Others require you to navigate your adult child witnessing your online dating adventures. Let's talk about ghosting. That modern phenomenon where someone simply disappears. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. But sometimes, ghosts come back. They become what some call zombies. These are the people who ghost you, vanish completely, then months later. They like your Instagram story. They comment on your post. They act as if nothing happened. As if they didn't leave you wondering what you did wrong, replaying conversations, questioning your worth. And now they want to engage. Casually. As if the silence never existed. One person described it perfectly. Men will ruin your whole life, and then come back and like your Instagram story. The audacity is almost impressive. Almost. Here's a story about respect and boundaries. A man matched with a woman on Hinge. They'd been messaging, building connection. They arranged a second date. He offered to pick her up. She gave him an address. Different from where he'd picked her up before. Already, something felt off. He arrived. She walked toward his car. But first, another person gave her a hug and a kiss on the cheek. She got in the car. Explained casually. She'd just been on a date with someone else. That person she'd just been with. That was her other date. And now, seamlessly, she was transitioning to him. He told her that felt disrespectful. Her response: "It shouldn't bother you because we're not in a relationship." Technically true, but emotionally tone-deaf. He asked her to leave his car, drove home, shared his story online, and was overwhelmingly validated. Because respect isn't something that only exists within official relationships. It's how we treat people, period. Especially people we claim to be interested in. Now, let me tell you about the house guest who wouldn't leave. This one is something special. A woman matched with a guy on Tinder. They met up. Things seemed fine. He came over. And then, he essentially didn't leave. For 2 weeks. At first, she thought maybe she was missing something. He'd say his housemate was working with the Russian mafia. Seriously. The Russian mafia. So he couldn't go home while his housemate was working. She'd tell him he needed to leave early because she had work in the morning. He'd agree. But he wouldn't leave. She'd go to work. Come home 10 hours later. And he'd still be there. Her housemates told her he'd been eating her food, taking trips down the road for fish and chips, making himself quite comfortable. Then, he got fired over the phone. In front of her. Called his dad to complain about it. It was mortifying. She finally got him to leave. After, as she admits, smoking a lot of his weed. And he stole her favorite shirt. 6 months later. Christmas Eve. He called. Said it was going to be his last day around. Some story about people who gave him up giving up his family. Looking back, she realized. He probably wasn't avoiding the Russian mafia. He was probably homeless. And she was too oblivious, too polite, too uncertain to enforce her own boundaries in her own home. Sometimes dating teaches us less about finding the right person and more about protecting ourselves from the wrong ones. Here's a twist that sounds like fiction. A man walked in on his girlfriend. Practicing. She was reading from a script. Rehearsing how to break up with someone. With him, he thought. His heart must have dropped. But then he listened closer. The script she was reading wasn't meant for him. It was for someone else. She was preparing to break up with someone else. While dating him. The layers of deception, the complexity of the situation. How do you even begin that conversation? Hey, I noticed you're practicing breaking up with someone, and I have concerns. The relationship, unsurprisingly, didn't last. But one has to wonder. Did she ever use that practice script? Or did the discovery derail her carefully rehearsed breakup speech? Dating apps have introduced a new level of bluntness. Sometimes painful, sometimes necessary. A guy went on a first date. The woman spent the entire time on her phone. Scrolling social media. Not even pretending to be engaged. At one point, he just stopped talking. She looked up briefly. Yeah, you keep talking. I can hear you. He'd driven to another city to meet her. She'd heavily edited her photos using face-tuning apps. She looked nothing like her pictures. And she spent their time together staring at a screen. The disrespect was so complete, so total, that it became almost fascinating. How does someone lack that much self-awareness? How do you think that behavior is acceptable? These are questions without answers. Just experiences that teach us to raise our standards. Let me share the coffee shop date story. They were supposed to meet for coffee. He arrived late. The conversation was torture. He didn't want to talk. Finally, she asked why. His response. His buddies were drinking in his dorm. He wanted to be there instead. She said, "Cool, you don't have to stay." And he left. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. Here's one that combines online dating with multi-level marketing. One person arrives expecting a date. The other arrives with a tablet and a presentation about a pyramid scheme. This wasn't a date. This was a recruitment event. The person sat through it, paid the bill, politely declined, and never heard from them again. Sometimes family involvement goes too far. A man, newly single, downloaded a dating app. Matched with a woman. They planned to go out for a movie and food. Everything seemed normal. Until she made an unusual request. She wanted her parents to come along. They were both in their 20s. Adult 20s. Not teenagers needing chaperones. Adult humans who wanted parental supervision on a first date. He didn't elaborate on whether he accepted this arrangement, but one imagines the answer was no. Because there's building a relationship with your partner's family. And then there's whatever this situation was attempting to be. Let's talk about the mysterious mansion. A woman pulled up to a first date. The address led her to the biggest house she'd ever seen. Enormous. Impressive. Luxurious. She started wondering. Is he a trust fund baby? Did he start some successful startup? Is this real life? He came out. Got in her passenger seat. Can we take your car? Mine is in the shop. Red flag number 1. She'd been looking forward to seeing his car. Imagining something matching the house. Instead, her 2001 Subaru would suffice. She was intrigued by the house the entire date. Finally, she begged for a tour. He agreed. She walked in and discovered it was a frat house. A glorified frat house. He wasn't a millionaire. He was a guy sharing a massive house with multiple roommates. The mansion was a mirage. A beautiful, expensive mirage. The relationship didn't progress beyond that revelation. Here's a story about assumptions and reality. A woman met someone from social media. They decided to meet up. Have drinks. She doesn't drink alcohol, but she went anyway. Already, an awkward foundation. Her date ordered beer. And drank it. Through a straw. Beer. Through a straw. 3 beers, in fact. The date ended with him face down on the sidewalk. The bouncer trying to get him a cab. She left. Obviously. But imagine being that bouncer. Just another night of dating disasters witnessed from the front lines. Another person's poor choices becoming someone else's story. Sometimes the end comes with unexpected companionship. A guy took a girl to see his dying grandmother. First date. Dying grandmother. Everyone standing around crying. Grandma unconscious in bed. The nurse in charge recognized the girl from high school. Made some snide comment about her being a theater geek. This wasn't romantic. This wasn't connection building. This was trauma tourism. The grandmother did recover. Lived 6 more months. But the relationship. That died right there in that hospital room. Some experiences are too heavy, too intimate, too inappropriate for a first date. Meeting the family usually comes later. Meeting the family during a medical crisis probably shouldn't come at all. Let's discuss the planning paradox. A woman had a great first date. Really great. The guy was happy to set up a second date. They were messaging constantly. Sending memes. Building connection. until the night before the second date. She was excited. And then, the day of the date, he ghosted. Completely. In below freezing weather, she waited. No message. No call. No explanation. Just absence. The whiplash from connection to abandonment. From daily communication to total silence. This is the particular cruelty of modern dating. How quickly someone can go from present to gone. From interested to invisible. With no warning and no explanation. Here's one that feels like a social experiment gone wrong. A man went on a Tinder date. When he arrived, there she was. With 4 of her friends. For friends he'd never been told would be there. For additional people he was apparently expected to pay for. They'd told the waiter he'd cover everything. All 5 meals. For a first date with one person that somehow became a group outing at his expense. He refused. Obviously. They lost their minds. Angry that he wouldn't fund their group dinner. Thankfully, the waiter was able to separate the bills. But imagine the audacity. The planning that went into this. Hey girls, I have a Tinder date. Want free dinner? I'll tell him he has to pay for everyone. Dating apps were supposed to make connection easier. Instead, sometimes they reveal exactly how shameless people can be. One more story before we move on. A woman matched with a guy on Hinge. They talked for ages during lockdown. Finally arranged to meet. For a bike ride. Simple, socially distanced, wholesome. They had a mild disagreement. About whether to ride to the beach or the park. Just a small difference of opinion. Normal, really. But he got really worked up. And then, he just rode away. Left her standing there with her bike. In the middle of the deserted southeastern suburbs. Alone. Over a disagreement about destination. The pandemic was hard on everyone. But it also revealed character. How people handle minor conflicts. How they treat others when stressed. This man failed that test spectacularly. And she was better off discovering it on a bike ride rather than months into a relationship. Take a moment. Breathe deeply. These stories might feel overwhelming. The dishonesty, the ghosting, the sheer strangeness of human behavior when romantic interest is involved. But here's the thing. Every person who experienced these stories survived them. Lived to tell the tale, often with humor. They learned. They grew. They developed better boundaries, clearer expectations, stronger senses of self-worth. Online dating didn't invent bad behavior. It just gave it new platforms. New methods. New opportunities for human nature to reveal itself. And while that can be disappointing, disheartening, even devastating, it's also information. Data we can use to make better choices, protect ourselves more effectively, recognize red flags more quickly. Rest your eyes. Relax your jaw. Let the tension leave your body. These stories aren't your stories. They're lessons learned by others, shared so that maybe, just maybe, we can all navigate this strange world of modern romance with a little more wisdom and a lot more self-respect. Now, let's talk about a different kind of distance. Not the emotional distance of ghosting or the physical distance of meeting strangers, but actual, geographic distance. The unique heartbreak of long-distance relationships. And how they end when love spans miles but can't bridge the gap. Distance. Such a simple word for such a complex experience. When you love someone who's far away, the relationship exists in a strange space. Not quite here, not quite there. Living in phone calls and video chats, in carefully planned visits and constant messages. And when it ends, the grief is peculiar. How do you miss someone who was already gone? How do you mourn a presence that was always partially absent? Let's explore these unique heartbreaks. The endings that happened across miles, time zones, and screens. Let's start with the break that wasn't really a break. A woman was engaged. Happily engaged, she thought. Her fiancé told her they should take a break. Just a break, he said. Before she left for a 6-week trip with her girlfriends. 6 weeks. 42 days. And he needed a break right before she went on her trip. Confused, hurt, but hoping it was temporary. When she returned, she acted like nothing had happened. As if the break announcement had never occurred. As if 6 weeks of uncertainty and pain could just be erased. He told her the wedding was off. Completely off. Not postponed. Cancelled. She begged him to talk. Her friends called him. Told him to stop acting like a spoiled little boy. But here's the thing. He wasn't being spoiled. He was being clear. She wanted to take a break before a long trip. He heard. I want to end this but don't want to say it directly. And when she came back pretending everything was fine, he had to be the one to actually end what she'd already abandoned. Sometimes a break is just a breakup that one person doesn't want to finalize. Here's a story about investment and loss. 2 people met online. Skyped for hours. 4 weeks. The connection felt real, deep, significant. He lived in San Francisco. She lived in Newberg, Oregon. They decided to meet halfway. Mount Shasta. Now, looking back, she realizes the danger. Meeting a stranger in a remote location. Things could have gone terribly wrong. But they didn't. They met. And within the first 10 minutes, both realized there was no spark. Everything they'd built online. The butterflies, the excitement, the connection. It didn't translate to real life. They'd constructed a fantasy. Beautiful and compelling. But ultimately, just fantasy. They spent that time together because they'd planned it. But the relationship was over before it really began. Sometimes the person we fall for through a screen is completely different from who they are in 3 dimensions. The voice, the laugh, the physical presence. These things matter. And no amount of virtual connection can guarantee real-world chemistry. Let me tell you about the text message analysis. A man spent 5 years in a relationship. When it ended, he went back through their texts. Not to torture himself, exactly, but to understand. He tracked their most used words each year. Year 1, during dating. Baby, haha, good. Playful, affectionate, light. Year 4, during engagement. Bub, movie, dinner, amazing. Planning together, building together, still connected. Year 5. The year she demanded a third move and then kicked him out. The words changed. The tone shifted. Looking at those word clouds side by side, you could see the relationship deteriorating in language patterns. How their communication evolved from intimate to functional to hostile. Technology gave him this insight. The ability to see, quantified and visual, how love transformed into its opposite. Some people look at old photos. He looked at linguistic data and found the same truth. Things change, people grow apart, and sometimes the evidence is hidden in the smallest details. Here's a heartbreak about timing. Someone matched with a beautiful non-binary person. Right before leaving town, the person messaged, "Hi." Simple, promising, perfect. But the timing couldn't have been worse. "I'm so sorry," they had to write back. "I'm no longer within the 5 miles I was before, and I'm about to be quarantined for the next 2 weeks. The response they received: "I'm sorry, you deserve better than this world." And that was the pickup line. That was the connection. Brief, compassionate, acknowledging the cruelty of circumstance. They promised to get back in touch if they ever returned. But the moment was lost. Sometimes the right person appears at exactly the wrong time. And all we can do is acknowledge the beautiful impossibility of it. Let's talk about the meeting that revealed everything. A woman was in a long-distance relationship. They'd met online, connected through a video game platform, talked constantly during the pandemic. She supported him financially. She was, by her own admission, a hopeless romantic. They finally arranged to meet in person. She built him up in her mind, created this image of who he was. The reality was nothing like the fantasy. Within hours, she wanted to break up. The person on the screen and the person in front of her were somehow completely different. Same face, same voice, but the energy, the presence, the actual experience of being with him, it didn't match what she'd imagined. This is the cruel paradox of online relationships. You can know someone intimately, their thoughts, their fears, their dreams, and still not know them at all. Because physical presence carries information that cameras can't capture. And sometimes that information changes everything. Here's one about sacrifice and resentment. A man was in a long-distance relationship. 3 years, they'd been trying to make it work. He finally decided. He needed to move on. Career, social life, his own needs. Everything was being sacrificed for this relationship. And for what? Video calls. Expensive plane tickets. Constant planning that never quite worked out. He realized he was throwing his life away, waiting for a future that might never arrive. The relationship existed in potential, in someday, in eventually, but his life, his actual, present, real life, was passing him by. Ending it felt like failure, like giving up. But it was actually the opposite. It was choosing himself, choosing presence over promise, choosing reality over hope. Let me share the career break story. A boyfriend told his girlfriend he needed a 1-year break to focus on his career. When someone asks for a year-long break, they're asking for permission to leave without the guilt. She broke up with him immediately. A year-long break isn't a break. It's a breakup someone doesn't have the courage to finalize. Here's a story about digital closure. 2 people were together for 7 years. Then he moved away for medical school. He'd been unhappy but couldn't say it directly. So he applied to schools far away, got accepted, and left, breaking up by geographic abandonment. She found out later he'd planned it all along. The move wasn't about his career. It was about escaping without having to actually end it. Let's discuss the investment paradox. In long-distance relationships, you invest everything: time, money, emotional energy. When it ends, all that investment feels wasted. But what you learned about yourself remains: your capacity for commitment, your ability to maintain connection despite difficulty, your strength in choosing to let go when necessary. Here's one about the pandemic in distance. 2 people were dating when lockdowns began. Suddenly, their normal, local relationship became long distance. Not because anyone moved, but because they couldn't see each other. Weeks became months. Video calls replaced dates. And slowly, they realized the relationship couldn't survive in this format. They needed physical presence, touch, shared experiences, spontaneous moments, none of which were possible through screens. When restrictions lifted, they tried to reconnect, but too much time had passed. They'd become different people, adapted to different lives. The relationship existed in the before times. It couldn't transition to the after. Sometimes distance isn't measured in miles but in circumstances. And some relationships can't bridge that gap. Let me tell you about fantasy grief. This is a concept that appears often in long-distance relationship endings. When you're not together physically, it's easier to maintain an idealized view. You don't see the daily annoyances, the way they chew, how they handle stress, their habits, their flaws, their humanity. You see curated versions, best selves, and you fill in the gaps with imagination. When the relationship ends, you're not just grieving the person. You're grieving the perfect relationship you imagined you'd have. Once distance wasn't a factor. The future you built in your mind, where everything would be easy and beautiful and right. That loss, the loss of a future that never existed, that can hurt more than losing the actual person. Because it's grief for potential, for possibility, for a dream. Here's a story about the ambiguous loss. A woman described her long-distance breakup like this. Throughout the relationship, her partner was emotionally present but physically absent. This paradox was normal, expected, part of their reality. When they broke up, nothing physically changed. He was still far away, still not there. But now, he was also emotionally absent. The loss was complete. Before, she grieved his physical absence while celebrating his emotional presence. Now, both were gone. And somehow that made the grief more confusing. Because what did she lose? Someone who was already gone. And yet, the loss was total. Devastating. This is the strange math of long-distance heartbreak. 0 physical presence minus emotional connection still equals unbearable emptiness. Let's talk about identity and loss. When you're in a long-distance relationship, part of your identity becomes the person who can do this, who can maintain love across miles, who is strong enough, committed enough, patient enough. When it ends, you lose not just the relationship, but that role, that version of yourself. The capable, dedicated long-distance partner. Who are you now? Someone who couldn't make it work. Someone who gave up. Someone who wasn't enough. These thoughts aren't true, of course. But they feel true. In the aftermath. When you're trying to rebuild a sense of self that didn't depend on maintaining an impossible situation. Here's one about the final video call. The last time they saw each other. Through screens. She'd practiced what to say. How to be kind but clear. He looked tired. The time difference meant it was late for him, early for her. They'd built their relationship around accommodating time zones. And now, they were using that skill one last time. To end things. She said what she'd prepared. He listened. Asked a few questions. They cried. Both of them. Watching each other cry through pixels. Unable to comfort. Unable to touch. It was fitting, in a tragic way, that their relationship ended as it had existed. Through screens. With distance. Wanting to reach for each other and unable to bridge the gap. When the call ended. That was it. No door to walk out of. No physical goodbye. Just a screen going black. And silence. Sometimes long-distance relationships end because the distance was supposed to be temporary. But temporary became permanent. The plan was always, in 6 months, after graduation, when the job situation changes. But 6 months became a year, became 2 years. And eventually, someone has to say it. This isn't temporary. This is our reality. And I can't do this reality anymore. That ending. It's not about falling out of love. It's about accepting that love alone can't sustain a relationship that exists primarily in waiting. In someday. In the perpetual future tense, breathe slowly. Let these stories wash over you. Long-distance relationships carry a particular kind of pain. The effort required is enormous. The sacrifice constant. And when they end, the grief is complex, layered, confusing. You're mourning what was, what could have been, and what you built in your imagination. But here's something to hold on to. Everyone who shared these stories, they survived. The relationships ended, but they continued, learned, grew, discovered that they were stronger than they thought, more resilient than they knew, that their capacity for love wasn't diminished by distance or ending, just redirected, refined, made wiser. Close your eyes. Feel your body relax into the surface beneath you. Let go of any tension you're holding. These stories aren't happening now. They're memories, lessons, experiences that shaped people but didn't define them. Just as your experiences, whatever they may be, are part of your journey, not the destination. Now, let's move into perhaps the most challenging category. The breakups that revealed red flags. Warning signs. Moments when ending the relationship wasn't just necessary. It was escape. When the goodbye came with relief, validation, and the realization that sometimes leaving is the healthiest choice you can make. Not all relationship endings are equal. Some are sad but necessary. Natural conclusions to connections that ran their course. But others are exits, escapes, moments when you realize that staying would mean losing yourself. These are the stories where the red flags finally became impossible to ignore. Where the ending, however painful, was also liberation. Let's talk about recognizing when goodbye isn't loss. It's survival. Remember the story of the dishes. We touched on it earlier. But let's go deeper. A man came home from work early every day. He cleaned up after himself. Basic adulting. His girlfriend would leave her dishes in the sink. And not just leave them. She demanded that he clean them. Not asked. Demanded. Despite being home while he was at work. Despite having the time and ability to clean her own messes. This demand became constant. Daily. Relentless. Until one day, something inside him shifted. He came home from work. Looked at the dishes. Looked at his life. Packed everything he owned. And left. Just left. No big confrontation. No final argument. Just quiet recognition that he deserved better. That being alone was preferable to being disrespected in his own home. Sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest truths. It's never really about the dishes. It's about respect. About partnership. About whether someone sees you as an equal or as unpaid labor. Here's a story that sounds almost absurd until you realize how common it is. A woman broke up with her boyfriend. Her stated reason: "You're too good of a guy and you treat me too well." She felt jealous of his exes. because he probably treated them the same way. Let that sink in. She was upset that his kindness was consistent. That treating partners well was his character, not a special exception he made for her. This isn't funny. It's tragic. Because what it reveals is how damaged we can become. How we can learn to believe we don't deserve goodness. That love should hurt. That if someone is consistently kind, there must be something wrong. This man dodged a bullet. Not because she was a bad person, but because she hadn't healed enough to accept good treatment. To recognize that consistency and kindness is a feature, not a bug. That a man who treats all his partners well is exactly who you want. Not someone to fear or resent. Let's talk about the 2 in the morning breakup. We mentioned it before. But consider the cruelty of the timing. Not just ending things, but the how and when. 2 in the morning. You're vulnerable. Asleep. Dreaming. He rolls over. I'm not happy anymore. That's it. Then gets up. Gets dressed. Insists on taking you home. It's 3 in the morning when you arrive. You have work in a few hours. You're in shock. Numb. You were staying at his place because you had no way to get to work from your own home. He lived within walking distance of your job. Now you're home. In the middle of the night. Expected to function in a couple hours. You end up walking 3 hours to work. Try to have a normal day. And break down at lunch. This isn't just a breakup. It's a demonstration of complete disregard for another person's well-being. Who ends things at 2 in the morning? Who disrupts someone's sleep, their safety, their ability to function? Someone who doesn't see their partner as a whole person. Just an obstacle to remove as quickly as possible. Whatever time is convenient for them. Here's one about delegation and cowardice. A girl wanted to break up with her boyfriend. But she couldn't. Or wouldn't. Make the call herself. So she had her stepsister do it. But not just call the boyfriend. No. Call his parents' house. The family phone. His dad answered. And this stepsister. This messenger who'd been recruited for maximum emotional removal. Told the father. That his son's girlfriend was breaking up with him. The father had to tell his son. Your girlfriend's stepsister just called. Apparently, you're single now. The layers of disconnection here. The girlfriend couldn't face it. Delegated to stepsister. Who didn't even manage to reach the actual boyfriend. So the father became the messenger. This isn't breaking up. This is emotional outsourcing. And what it taught this man was that he'd been dating someone who would go to these lengths to avoid a difficult conversation. Someone who valued her own comfort over his dignity. That's valuable information. Painful, but valuable. Let's discuss the boundary violation. A woman met someone online. Their first date was okay. But it was the last time they really went out in public. He was older than her. After work, he'd come to her college dorm. And he'd pressure her. Mock her. make her feel guilty if she didn't want to be intimate. She thought she loved him, thought he knew best because he was older. He'd avoid her for months, then reappear in September like nothing happened. He was a teacher. She found out later. He got engaged to another woman while still seeing her. They got married, while he was still trying to convince her they had a happy relationship together. This story is darker than others we've shared, because it's not just about a bad breakup. It's about manipulation, about an older person taking advantage of someone younger, someone inexperienced who didn't yet know that this wasn't normal, wasn't okay, wasn't love. If this resonates with you, if you've experienced something similar, know that it wasn't your fault, that you deserved better, that recognizing it now, understanding it now, is part of your healing. Here's one about life stages and awareness. A woman complained throughout their date about her parents making her do chores, washing dishes. How annoying it was. This upset her. Taking care of her living space, contributing to her household. Normal, basic responsibilities. She was 24 years old. 24. And she thought doing dishes was an unreasonable parental demand. Sometimes a person reveals exactly who they are. Their level of maturity, their sense of responsibility, their understanding of how the world works. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let them go figure it out on their own. Because you can't date potential. You can't date who someone might become. You can only date who they are right now. In that moment. Complaining about washing dishes at 24. Let's talk about the age lie. A man matched with someone on a dating app. She said she was 25. He was 19. She asked if he minded dating someone older. He said no. They arranged to meet. When she arrived, he thought she just photographed really well. Turns out, she was 49. Using 20-year-old photos. Lying about her age by 24 years. They went to a bowling alley, where her son worked. Her son, who was older than her date. The discomfort when they walked in. That wasn't first date nerves. That was her realizing her adult son was about to witness her deception. This isn't a white lie about height. This is catfishing. This is creating an entirely different persona. And the younger person in this scenario, he was gracious. Made the best of it. But imagine the son. Seeing your mom on a date with someone younger than you. With someone she'd lied to. What a family dinner conversation that must have spawned. Here's a chilling one about boundaries and safety. A man met a woman online. During their conversations, he mentioned his neighbors by name. They hadn't met in person yet. One day, he was outside changing his front door lock. Noticed a car driving by slowly. Odd, but he didn't think much of it. Later, he got a text from her. A picture of him. Taken from the road. While he was working on his door. Back turned to the street. Unaware. She'd found his house. Driven by. photographed him without permission or warning, and sent it like it was normal, cute, romantic. It wasn't. It was stalking. He didn't date for years after that, because that moment taught him how quickly interest becomes obsession, how easily boundaries can be violated, how unsafe we can be made to feel by someone we trusted with personal information. This is why we're careful, why we don't share addresses early, why we meet in public. Because sometimes people don't understand where interest ends and invasion begins. Let me share one about mismatched priorities. A woman went on a date. Everything seemed fine initially. He was charming, funny, offered to order for her. How sweet, she thought. Then the waiter arrived. He ordered himself a juicy steak with mashed potatoes. And for her, a salad. Just a salad. No asking what she wanted. No discussion. He just decided. She deserved rabbit food while he enjoyed a full meal. This might seem small. Just food. But it's not about food. It's about control. About making decisions for another person without their input. About treating a date like a child who needs their meal chosen for them. Or worse, like someone who shouldn't eat a real meal. Who should watch him eat while she nibbles lettuce? She didn't see him again. Because that salad was information. Data about how he saw her. How he'd treat her. What kind of partner he'd be. Here's one about anger and priorities. A guy went on a date. She spent the entire evening on her phone, completely engaged with her screen. Not with him. They were supposed to get coffee after. But he had a hunch. He could drive her all the way home. And she wouldn't even notice. So he did. Drove right to her apartment. She looked up for the first time all evening. Wait, is that it? That's how little attention she'd been paying. A whole car ride home. And she only noticed when they'd arrived. He'd been so inconsequential to her experience that she didn't register any of it. This tells you everything about how she valued his time. His effort. His presence. Which is to say, she didn't. Let's talk about the support animal situation. A man matched with someone. They agreed to meet for dinner. She arrived. With her emotional support iguana. An actual iguana. Now, emotional support animals serve important purposes. They help people manage anxiety, depression, various challenges. But a dinner date. A restaurant. First meeting. With a reptile. This requires discussion beforehand. Preparation. Consent from the other person. You can't just surprise someone with your iguana and expect them to be comfortable. Or for the restaurant to be prepared. Some surprises are delightful. Others are scaled and require special accommodations. Here's one that captures entitlement perfectly. A man went on a blind date. First and last blind date, he specifies. The guy showed up. With his mother. Forgot his wallet. And after the date paid for all three of them, the guy had the audacity to ask for two things: a loan and a second date. Because apparently his mother wanted to see her again. The mother wanted to see the woman her son had dragged on a date. Without money, without warning. This isn't just red flags. This is an entire red flag factory operating at full capacity. The fact that the mother wanted a second date. What was happening in that family dynamic? These are mysteries better left unexplored. Let's discuss the ex-boyfriend pickup. A woman went on a Tinder date. The girl picked her up. Seemed fine. Then they picked up the girl's ex-boyfriend. Then went to a car meet. Just sat in a parking lot with other car people. And the ex-boyfriend. This wasn't a date. This was being a third wheel to your date and her ex-boyfriend's reunion. Why? What was the end game? Was this some kind of test? A weird attempt at making the ex jealous? Using someone from a dating app as a prop in relationship drama? We'll never know. Because unsurprisingly, there was no second date. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let go of any relationship weight you're carrying. The guilt over endings. The shame over choices. The regret over time invested. The anger over how you were treated. Let it all go. Just for tonight. Just to rest. You can pick it back up tomorrow if you need to. But right now, in this moment, you are safe. You are whole. You are enough. Your past relationships, they're part of your story. But they're not the whole story. There are chapters yet unwritten. Connections yet unmade. Versions of yourself you haven't met yet. And every ending, every goodbye, every heartbreak has prepared you for what comes next. So rest now. Breathe deeply. Feel your body relaxing completely. Let these stories fade into background noise. Let your mind quiet. Let sleep come gently. Naturally. Tomorrow is a new day. Full of possibility. Of potential. Of chances to choose yourself. To honor your boundaries. To recognize your worth. To love wisely and bravely. But tonight, just rest. Just be. Just breathe. Sweet dreams.